from the Workplace Ninja Summit in Lucerne. Highlights, insights, and simply interesting talks. This is the Workplace Ninja Podcast.
And the next recording, it will be starting on the Workplace Ninja Summit here in Lucerne. We're still on day 2, second recording, new people on the table. My name is Frans Oudendorp and I have with me Thomas Kurth. Thomas will co-hosting this session, try to co-host, but I think that will work quite good. And we have again Sami Laiho from Finland. He's back.
Here I am.
Yeah, and Michael just arrived on time for all the sessions that you need to give.
Uh-huh.
So please welcome guys on this table. Let's talk about a bit on security on the sessions that you need to give because not everything is already done. We're just starting on day 2. Sami, what excites you to be here again? Because we talked about last year about different topics, also on the table. It was in Baden, I guess.
Yeah, that was in Baden. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's exciting to be back here. I love the setup. I like the location. Mirko chose us a very, very decent view, so I really like the place. Plus, relatively easy travel for me, so super nice and a nice big crowd. At least yesterday, full session rooms and good vibes.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And Mike, how's for you?
Pretty much the same thing. I love the conference. It's one of the better ones in Europe, definitely from a size perspective, but also from content wise. Plus, it's not that far away, and Mirko really takes care of his speakers. The location, Lucerne, is beautiful. Baden was great, but Lucerne is different level. So I always enjoy attending.
Yeah, how is it for you, Thomas, being again organizing this event?
Yeah, first day went well, so I'm very happy how it turned out until now, and I see a lot of very cool sessions until now. So,
yeah, good. Let's talk about the things that we are doing on this conference, Sami. What is the main topic that you want to get the audience to take away from the sessions that you give?
I'm stuck at the trying to get people to understand that what we're deploying are concepts instead of products. So trying to get people into thinking. They many times arrive thinking that someone will just pinpoint a product for them and we'll just press deploy and that's it, and I try to make them understand why we're doing things, what's the actual reasoning behind, so that take privileged access workstations for example. It's very, very, very difficult to find 2 places where the exact same solution would work. If it would work, there would be a button in the GUI that would say enable PAW, and that would be it. Plus, in a way, it's nice. They need us consultants still. Things are not always as they appear on Microsoft's website, and there is no click-through instructions that would work outside of the lab. So otherwise, I would be out of work if everything was just switch on things and that's it. So I want to teach concepts. I love it, making people see light bulbs on people's heads in kind of like understanding why we're doing things, and try to convince them that security plays a support function in the company to keep things rolling instead of being this no department that just does security because of security.
Yeah. How's that for you, Mike? Because I know last year we had a recording on privileged access workstation, especially on that topic, because you did a session on that. How, if you look back at the past year, how is that improved in the area and at customers while we're working?
Hardly, or not as much as I would love to see, or at the level I would like to see it. It's still a difficult conversation to convince most customers, to move to a privileged access workstation. So as Sami, I am more trying to make people understand why this is important. And I think I used last year the yellow hat example, like, when you go to a construction site, everyone wears a yellow hat because of security. Well, a privileged access workstation is our yellow hat. Yet, we don't have laws requiring us to use it. So I would love legislation to actually say you have to use a PAW. This being said, even though I submitted some technical sessions as well, I'm really glad that my session this year is not so much about technology itself. It's more about, how do you do security? Like, how do you manage security? So let's move away from pinpoint solutions and let's try to understand, why are we doing all of this? How do you do this? What's the process behind of it? What are the steps needed to get to a good solution, whatever the technological solution is that you're using? So evangelizing the, let's structurize this cybersecurity thing a little bit more.
Yeah. But I have seen more changes in the past years. I mean, I met Sami probably 12 or 15 years ago the first time, and he is still talking about the same stuff. But when I look back in the past 3 to 4 years, I see change that customers are starting to adopt a tiering model, enterprise access model. They are at least trying to implement it. I mean, they are started talking about, okay, can I use W365? Can I use AVD, for example, as a POS solution? Do I really need a physical device? They start to talk about it. I think 5 years back, it was like...
No, it was like a military solution. That's like military would do it, and that's just they shoot missiles. We don't. So I think now more people are waking up to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good thing. But what I'm wondering is how many people have deployed a PAW because they understand why they need it in their environment versus I'm just doing it because someone told me to.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm trying to make people understand. It's kind of the same as trying to get rid, like my thing for 24 years has been trying to get rid of end user admin rights. So that's kind of the same story. Like actually when you get into it and you understand that it's good for you, it's easy to win people over if you have a positive thing to add.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're doing it just because standard says you have to do this, that still feels like someone's blocking you from doing cool stuff. And you don't win people over by having them think that someone's denying me of doing something instead of us trying to keep you having a better performing computer. I mean, it's just the negativity is also that's why I said no department. I mean, you go to security and say you can't do this.
I love the fact that you quoted that because it was at a TechEd conference still a couple of years back. Well, almost 10 years ago now.
That's when the last TechEd was.
Yeah, just don't even get me started. I'm getting old. It was at a TechEd conference. It was Greg Taylor back then in the Exchange world. He was talking about security and Exchange. While there was still a thing called Exchange. But the thing he said is like, the role of security in a company is not to say no, but it is to make everything you want to do possible in a secure manner. And those words rang because I was like, that is exactly what they need to be versus the no department that tells me what I can do, right? I'm seeing some change there. But, there's still a long way to go from the no, you can't do this versus let me figure out how I can make this work in a secure manner. So I think you hit the nail on the head on that one. That's definitely a change that we need in mentality.
What I also think is if you provide a privileged access workstation, for example, I mean, if you go 10 years back, an admin got a new notebook. He had to install AirSat tools and all the stuff his own. Now he gets just access to it. So it's also better for him. And I always also try to sell this aspect because I think that's a big benefit also for them. And I had a very good example at the customer. We implemented the whole tiering model, everything good, but the main domain admin still says, I keep my old account active for emergency. There was a pen test. It changed then. So I think if you really implement it well, then people also start to realize, okay, what is at the end the impact? And these one pen test has really changed how the whole organization was talking about the whole topic at the end.
Well, I mean, it still took a pen test for it to actually sink in. It's kind of like, when you're at a dangerous crossroad, not to, slam any government or so, but usually it takes a really big accident before they realize we need to do something about it. And unfortunately, lots of organizations either need a pen test, which is then the ideal solution, but most of them just, face it when they got hacked and they're like, maybe we should do something about this.
Yeah, and that's kind of the traffic is. I think it's a great example because that's in Finland. It's exactly the same thing. It's a dangerous crossroad. Everyone who lives nearby has been complaining about it for a decade. It's been written on every single possible paper. Everyone's talking about it. Nothing happens, and then you get an accident, and then suddenly, we have to fix it.
Yeah,
which is so. But that is a perfect analogy. Honestly, that is exactly how it's like. And what I don't like about the going back to changing mentalities, one thing I'm trying to do is to kind of like stop the security departments are too much trying to cover their own behinds. I mean, we got this PAW, and you've been implementing it for, like I said, you get 4 days, let's do it. And after 3 months you call in, it's still a proof of concept because we still think there's a potential hole here. We're still and I'm like, get it into production, stop, get it into production. We can then fix it, but you'll be 99% protected while you're doing it instead of waiting 3 hours. And the reason is they're trying to be perfect, but only because they are afraid that they fail. Yep. So if it's an external security company comes in, it's many times the same thing. They come in, they deploy something, and you can instantly know if they didn't get this big picture is when you see them like they're only covering their own tracks here. That they're just making sure that their solution will not be the one that gets blamed if there's a breach.
Yep.
And that's when I have to go in and say, no, we need your services. Every one of us can fail. You don't need to be perfect. But deploy now, because we need the protections now and not in 3 months.
Yeah, so what I'm afraid of is that the blame game is actually is at fault here, right? Because whenever there's a breach, everyone's like, it wasn't my fault because no one wants to blame, obviously, right? And in order to change that mentality, you have to have an incentive, right, to allow people to quote unquote fail. Like, if you do your best and you did everything you could, then there is nothing to blame if something happens, because at the end of the day, there is no such thing as being 100% secure.
Absolutely.
However, there is this thing called legislation, and there is that new kid on the block called NIS2.
Yeah, NIS2. Yeah.
And what it actually does, and I love and I hate it at the same time, is it ups the personal responsibility for company owners, meaning that if you get breached and it turns out that you didn't do what you needed to do or didn't take your responsibility, then you can be financially liable. This will only increase the blame game, because if something happens, they will be immediately looking for someone else to blame, because no one wants to be at fault, especially if you're financially liable.
Exactly, the money. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah, that was one of the questions: regulations and compliance. How can that become stricter and stricter? Is that only impacting the blame game, so what you say, or is it really helping organizations to move further on the security part?
I think the number one thing is that someone actually pushes a framework. Someone pushes some sort of a structure to look at on what to do. I mean, someone comes in and says, here is a list of things you should do. I think that's honestly very positive. There are people who have absolutely no idea that this security could be a structured thing. No one has a list of what to do. So in that sense, I would say it's good. Mm-hmm. What I hate about is exactly what Michael said, that the negative part of this is as long as someone's going to say you are going to pay for this, they will 10 times more find someone else to pay for it. So I totally 100% agree with that. So that's the negative thing about it. But in general, I think it's kind of the same as someone says that even if you had before ISO 27001 stuff, it's sometimes it's ridiculous when you see the audits happening. These guys don't understand anything, honestly, about security. They're like accountants or someone who's become a security expert suddenly, and they come in and they say you have to concentrate on this. I'm like, that is the absolute smallest problem of ours.
Yeah.
So that's of course annoying from this perspective, but at least there is a list.
Yeah.
So I do agree. It's better to have very descriptive guidance and, better do these things and, forget about the rest, but do these things well because you'd be better off. But then there is also the quote unquote misunderstanding about all the frameworks. Like ISO, I see people say, hey, I'm ISO certified, so I'm secure. I'm like, hell no. You could be. Like, our company is ISO certified. We've been for 4 years now. I can testify that we're probably going to be very secure. But the idea behind things like ISO is, say as you do and do as you say. Yep. So if you say that you don't do much, you don't have to do much and you'll be compliant, but you won't be secure for it anyway. Lots of people have figured that one out where, just going to say that I'm not going to do much, but I'm not going to do much in reality. So therefore, green check mark on the audit. So I think even though the 27002, the controls actually are pretty prescriptive, there's no real world touch point on that. And maybe we will see some framework that at some point will get standardized across the whole world because everyone always agrees we can all follow that guidance.
But what I see is really what has increased is the amount of contracting stuff you have to do between companies. I mean, all these standards. I mean, that was one of the best benefits of having the ISO 27001 was just to have, hey, I have it, check mark at the other company. But I think all these new laws don't bring always the big benefit. They just provide a lot of effort in administrative tasks, not IT administrative tasks, where we should invest at the end more. So it's more management, doing more paperwork, and
that's why we need these. That's why we need these evangelizing on why we do things, because that again goes back to the same thing. If you're looking at a list from an ISO certification and your mindset already is this is the easiest way to get a check mark, then you didn't understand what we're doing. I mean, exactly. That's just the funny thing is that we all end up in this, and that's why sometimes people come to sessions and they're like, oh, I wanted to have an exact step-by-step instruction on how to deploy this. And that's when I feel like I failed, because then honestly, that's exactly what I wanted them to understand, that you don't have one. And now...
Yeah, but on the other end, both of you are a bit of a strong advocate on least privilege. Least privilege is part of every compliance framework that's there, so to say. Are there some practical ways how businesses can implement this in a good manner?
Of course.
It's on his T-shirt.
Yeah.
It's on his T-shirt.
What's on his T-shirt?
Like the best quote ever. Admin rights are not human rights. Sorry, I had to quote that.
Thank you. Free commercial.
Yeah, but
I love it.
It's true, definitely.
No, I mean there are, and this is one of the games where people have this old model of the scale where you have security and usability, and you take security up and usability goes down. And I always say it's triangle. There's three things. There's usability, security, and cost. And you can get two, but you can never get three. So you can make a cheap, usable one. It won't be that secure. You can make a cheap, secure one. It won't be that usable. You can make a secure and usable one, but yes, there's probably some investments involved in this. And that's why I try to focus on how much we gain by using least privilege instead of like if you thinking you pay this much more of compared to what you have now. But then if I can show them like statistics, we get 75% less service desk tickets, we get 65% less reinstallations. I mean, because it's imaginary money.
Yeah.
You have to quantify it to them and explain that there are actually gains involved, because the boss will require even more convincing, because it's imaginary money that you don't see, because it's just savings from a process.
Yep.
So there are ways, and now Microsoft is in a very difficult situation internally currently, because most of my customers would like to use EPM, for example, from Intune Suite, but now they've been stalling for like half a year and just that's because of the internal competition. They got the new admin-less feature coming out. They got a group working with sudo for Windows. Still got a cool group working for UAC. So you got like 4 things that are trying to do the same thing.
Yep.
And now we're a little bit suffering on that front because they will never, sadly, but they internally will not work for a common goal. Everyone competes there as well, meaning that ours is best. Let's wait for who. And then half a year ago, the product group said something like, oh, we have to wait for something to happen first before we do that. And then, of course, we don't know what it is. And then at some point you understand, oh, they were waiting for admin-less. Now, admin-less, they say, is a consumer thing. It will probably help out. Maybe even developers might benefit from it because it's not going to be a controlled way of elevating yourself as EPM and all the PAM solutions are, where the company controls what can be elevated. Admin-less is, I want to elevate now and that's okay. So it's just kind of a more powerful UAC in a way.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. EPM is on my table all the time because many companies find it a lot easier to put that into the same invoice as everything else. As I would currently, of course, want to have a third-party solution for it. The biggest problem currently with this is absolutely the fact that they have a PAM solution for the endpoint, but the endpoint, if you are a dev, you open up Visual Studio as a dev, you can easily elevate Visual Studio, but when you go to my projects, it's not your projects. It's the projects of the virtual account that they're using behind, which means that you have this dual identity problem, which would work for a person who is installing a printer. Call in, say, I need to install a printer. We'll give you a privilege to do it. Go ahead and do it, and they will install a printer. That's a shared resource for every profile, normally. But then when you're a dev, which means you constantly need to elevate.
Yep.
And if we look at the biggest mistakes of like Microsoft security that has happened the last few years, when they lost the freaking certificates for Microsoft accounts.
Yeah.
That's a dev. Devs are like, wonder why devs are cause of this. Because they have the ones who have the insane privileges for everywhere, and they're the ones who can run whatever they want because apparently we're blocking their creativity if we try it. And I mean, so I honestly try to get these devs to behave based on least privilege. The whole concept is very interesting because there is not a single operating system in the world except Windows where people actually think that admin rights are human rights. Mm-hmm. Every other one who plays with Mac OS X, which is Unix, or Linux, every freaking one understands you're not supposed to play games with root. So why is it just Windows? I mean, the history goes back to Windows XP where they had to do this because they put an enterprise solution into everyone's table, which was built to always have a service desk to support you. And now you didn't, so we had to give the service desk rights to the end user. So that's where it happened. But it's just, the whole thing is, I always, when people are like, "Why?" But no, everyone suffers from this. Honestly, only Windows people suffer.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I made a switch to Apple Mac OS a while ago. I mean, you know, it's interesting to see how it's in people's minds, but at the same time, I do see a shift in the mindset from developers where, you know, a couple of years back, it's like, just give me my admin rights because I need it. Right now, they're like, I don't want it because it's a certain responsibility and the blame game is going to end with me. So, you know, that's where the blame game helps.
Yeah, it helps, yeah.
But then you hit the reality of, you know, try to be a developer without admin rights on Windows. It just cannot be done, period. Yes. Like there is no other, it's virtually impossible. So we're not even giving them the ability to do it easily. Yeah. So we're facing the architectures of third-party, you know, admin by request type of stuff, EPM management stuff. So we're adding friction for developers in order for them to do their job because the tools that they're given don't even support, you know, admin-less, full admin-less, I mean, right? So I think there is a shared responsibility that we need to do some part of the game.
Absolutely.
But all the third parties that write crap software and even Microsoft on the Visual Studio, just make sure that we don't need admin rights to do what we need to do in order to develop. Just solve those things, all right? And then, you know, the world will be a better place for it. I understand that your legacy, your technical debt is causing this. but fix it moving forward, please, because we'll be having this conversation for a couple of years.
Forever.
Still.
I've been having it for 24 years now. So.
But I think we have now talked a lot about products. At the beginning, we said it's more processes which are important. I think we could do a lot more than what we normally do in companies with just setting the correct settings, removing rights. I mean,
in that sense, of course.
We don't have to talk about developers. I mean, that's a specific use case, but we can do already a lot without additional products. And I think that's also important.
There's 95% of employees will survive perfectly fine without any admin rights. That's for sure. That's always when the problem with the salespeople is they come into a company and say, whether it's admin by request, beyond trust, CyberArk, whatever. I mean, they come in and say, the customer asks, how much money does this cost? How many computers do you have? 16,000. And then it's a lot of money. At the end of the day, you only needed it for 200 people. But of course, no sales guy would come in and say, you should only find the absolute minimum possibility of buying our licenses. Yeah. That's where consultants come in, and we can hope we can have saved the day.
Yeah. That's a bit of more misconception within security. Last question. What's a common misconception within security you often hear? Is that the admin rights are human rights, or are there other things? Yeah?
I ended my session yesterday. I had a very State of the Union kind of a keynote level talk, and I ended it by saying that in security you have to remember that nowadays your job is not to stop the enemy. Your job is to slow them down. So I mean, people put in app locker or any kind of an allow listing solution, and they hone it to 99.99%. And then when there's a potential hole somewhere, they panic. This is not working. We have to get rid of this. This is horrible. And I'm like, no. Your app locker or whatever allow listing will make them do so many twists and turns inside of your environment that it becomes an anomaly, which means your SOC will catch it. But the SOC can't catch things if you let everything flow freely. They have hundreds of thousands of events to look for. It will not catch their eye, or even AI's eye.
Yeah.
If it's just looks like normal behavior.
Yeah.
But when you make them go like this, swim sideways, go around the place, run 1,000 PowerShell commandlets to try to execute a file, that is very far from a standard user hitting 1,000 PowerShell command in few seconds. A good SOC will catch that as an anomaly and report it. It's exactly the example I used was the hotel. If you have a hotel key card, it's not the lock's job to actually stop you from getting in. Not to full extent, because if you go to the correct room, everything's fine. But if you find a key on the floor, that will work on one door. Locks will not prevent you from getting in. But video surveillance will see you going through 400 rooms like this.
Yep.
And honestly, the lock will do nothing to prevent this. But the video surveillance should identify an anomaly going around the hotel trying every freaking door.
Yeah.
I love how you say should, because it does require you to have something, not someone, something looking at those anomalies, which is an entirely different discussion.
Absolutely.
But to your point, I think the misconception is, getting away from the walled garden approach. There's no way that no matter how much money you spend, you're going to be 100% safe. So forget about being safe, the assume breach that has been around for decades now. Just assume the fact that they're going to be in at some point, if not already, and just make sure that you can detect and respond. It's like the military, if you will, right? We can build iron domes and shields of whatever. It will never ever prevent someone else from attacking you, and maybe even being successful. Yep. So what most of the militaries do, they prepare, they make sure they have, they know what to do when it happens, and then they respond when it happens. Still a shit show at the end of the day, excuse my French. But that's what you need to do. It's the same thing. If you get attacked and if they're successful in an attack, better make sure that you've detected it and that you respond accordingly. Yes, you're going to go to a proverbial war, cyber war at that point in time, but that's the point, right? Because if you don't respond, then you're,
Interesting.
15 minutes and domain admin and stuff, and then it's game over anyway.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think we can talk about this kind of stuff for hours, but let's don't do that. Maybe we can set up another moment for that as well. But thank you for being on the table, Sami, Mike,
Thank you.
and Thomas.
Thanks.
If you like this video, like and subscribe to see all the notifications coming through for all the new stuff. We will record new videos about Intune security, but also identity as well on this event. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, listening. See you next time.